Welcome to Skybound Ops.
That's the one I was talking about. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Skybound Ops. Today's guest is somebody who's been in aviation and has seen aviation inside and out, from the hangar floor, airline operations, and now at the center of one of the industry's largest sourcing platforms. I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Stefan Fletcher, owner and managing director of AVSpares, with more than 3 decades in aviation spanning materials materials planning. That was a tongue twister. Sorry about that. MRO leadership, tooling, ERP programs, and global marketplaces. A little personal story about Stefan. I took this role with ERP Aero almost 2 years ago. I reached out to him a few months down the road, and from day one, I felt extremely welcome. He put out a couple of offers for me that I wasn't really comfortable in accepting until we got into a position where I can probably most likely reciprocate. But we've developed a friendship along the way that I think is very, very fruitful and that I enjoy very well. And I like nothing more than to spend the next half hour or 45 minutes with him in order to find out a little bit more about his story. And I'll tell you this, if you care about aviation, if you care about what works in the real world, I think this episode is for you. So without any further ado, Stefan, welcome to Skybound Ops. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for such a wonderful introduction. It's nice to be here and have a good conversation with you about all sorts of things. I'm looking forward to it.
So am I. I feel I'm excited to do this. I've wanted to do this for a while, and I'm glad to just dive right in, if that's okay with you.
Sure, no problem at all.
So let's take it from the top. Where are you joining us from today, and what's been taking up most of your time recently?
Okay, so I'm joining you from Exeter, which is where I have AVSpares, or some people call it avspares.com, based. We're a small city down in the southwest of the UK. I settled here and in this area around about 2005, so it just seemed natural to stay here. It's a lovely place to be. We do have sun today, but as you're probably aware, our UK summers last about 4 days. So we're on day one, and it's and it's only March. But yeah, it's a nice place to be, and I'm very happy to be sort of located down here in the southwest. We're about 2.5 hours southwest of London, so it's easy for me to get up for meetings or visit the capital if I need to. So this week, just to give you a bit of a potted history of AVSpares, sure. It's obviously a listing website. It's been around since 2007. We have thousands of registered users. A lot of those, a good percentage of those, are listing stock with us, and it has been a baptism of fire for me because I've always been hands-on in the materials world, in and around, and supply chain in and around aviation, but to come into owning a website and then facing the IT challenges that come with that has been a big eye-opener for me, for the changes of not dealing with so many people but dealing with code, and really trying to get the site where I want it to be has been quite an interesting journey for the last 3-4 years. So this week has been very busy. We've been changing some things in the background, and I think I've mentioned to you in the past how making a small change can affect so many other things down the line. So the day could get longer in a simple thing, but it's all good.
Does, right? It does, and I can relate in a myriad of different ways, and I don't know if I'd have it any other way. It's just part of the journey, I think, and it's funny. I don't know if you can relate when I'm doing something and nothing goes off the tracks for a day or two. I feel weird because I feel out of place.
100%. I think I've got to that age now where you've got to expect the few bumps in the road, and that's the learning process. And that's where we scrape our knees, get up again, and think, right, don't do that again. How can I stop doing that again? And who can I rely on to make sure and remind me not to do it again? So that's the way it goes. It's all good though. I'm enjoying what I'm doing immensely. It gives me a lot of freedom. I work from home a lot of the time, but I haven't lost contact with so many people I've met in my 34 years in this business. So yeah, it's good. It's all good.
So speaking of that, so before we dive in, or I guess get a little bit deeper, when somebody asks you based on what you just said, because sometimes I struggle with when somebody asks me the same question, especially with what I used to do, but with what I do now. When somebody asks you, what do you do now? What is the simplest thing that you usually say?
Okay. So the two key words are probably streamline and facilitate, if I can.
I like that.
Let's just talk about AVSpares for a moment. It's been around a long time. It started off as a free-to-use platform that was created by a previous contact of mine, and he developed it to compete with the ILS and provide something that, or the ILS membership costs were quite high for some people, and it wasn't workable. So he developed this platform that allowed them to list. And even from the early days, I mean, as the web was growing, it was getting around about 350 to 400,000 hits a week. So a lot of people knew it. So it's well established, and it's up there with the likes of other platforms like PartSpace, ILS. So we've taken that. Yes, we've monetized it because in what I was doing or trying to achieve in the early days from 2021 onwards when I took it on, I didn't realize how important the modernization of the code would be for the modules I had planned. So, with what I do with AV Spares is basically keep the wheels turning, modernize as much as possible, and I've got another 8 modules which I want to add over the coming years. So it will be, in my mind, a one-stop shop with a very low cost for users to find what they need worldwide. As I said earlier, we've got thousands of registered users, a lot listing stock, and we are processing a lot of RFQs through the system and just trying to keep it simple. People don't want complicated, so that's the plan.
No,
On the
they
other
really
hand,
don't.
no, well, this is the thing, and with my other business, which has only started in 2024, which is SF Aviation Services, that's where the streamlining comes in. Because with AI as it is and the way it's growing, I'm learning more and more about what can be done in fewer clicks. So I'm going into businesses, talking to them, making introductions from maybe a tooling manufacturer to a major airline or aircraft manufacturer to start the ball rolling, but also look at their processes and help them develop with the help of developers I know and coders that I know to streamline processes for them, save them time and money in the long run. So that's in a
So,
nutshell what I'm trying to do with the two businesses.
so let's talk about that for a minute. Actually, let's go back a little bit further and I don't know if set the stage is the right term, but what originally pulled you into aviation? And a part two to that question, I guess, would be, what was your very first role in the industry? If we can go back.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Okay. Aviation it was a came out of the blue. I came out of college with just computers in my head. It was going to be tech, it was going to be programming. And the UK hit a pretty nasty recession around about 88 to 91. And I was invited because my parents owned two pubs in the southeast of the UK, and we had customers coming, going, and I learned an awful lot about people. And one of our particular customers, who was the managing director of an aviation firm not far from us, he just presented an option and said, "Did I want to work in the stores over what was going to be just the summer of 1991?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Things are pretty tough out here to find my way into the tech and IT side, so I'll go for it." So I ended up within the first 3 weeks of that doing stock checking of 111 stock. I was caked in dust, and I was working through that. It was all very interesting, not knowing one part from another, but I learned a lot. And I kept at it, and I did that stock check, and eventually my time increased with the company. I moved more into the stores, the shipping, and it was and taking all tech aside, which was the industry I wanted to move into, I found we were doing a lot very manually. We were using a green screen system, and literally the phone would ring, we would take the call from the buyer, we would then quote them from what we see on the screen. They would then fax through or telex through a PO. We would then go down, pull the part from stock, invoice it out of the system, generate the CFC, find the original certs to go with it, seal the box, go upstairs, and then type out the FedEx waybill, take it back downstairs, put everything together, and then watch the driver sign all of those packages onto his van at the end of the day. So we would deal everything from the sales right the way through to shipping. And it was very interesting. So, yeah, I learned an awful lot. What actually turned my mind to understanding even more was in 1997, after 6 years with the business, we realized we needed the quality system in place. And because I was somewhat dealing with IT by that point more, it seemed fitting that I could audit every other department without there being a conflict of interest. So I learned how to write a BS 5750 manual. It ended up being just under 100 pages long, and I would audit internally and deal with the external audits every year. And then that just turned into visiting the head office in Miami and then other remote offices in Singapore and Johannesburg. And I went sort of two-tier. I would travel around the world visiting these offices, dealing with IT, but also quality auditing as I went. So it seemed like a good fix.
So, that's interesting. That covered part of my next question, which is what things were like day to day. I think you just covered that well. So I'll ask you what those early years, however they progressed, but even though you just described it a little bit, what did they teach you, or how did they shape you to lead into today? Does that make sense, what I just said, or do you want me to rephrase?
Yeah. Again, with so much manual work being done at that time, it seemed like a long day, and the production was, you were great if you got, say, 12, maybe 14 orders out the door, because you're constantly answering the phone, dealing with another issue, and waiting for the response, which brings me to some issues I found in those early years where obviously you're only dealing with people by fax, by telex. Spec 2000 started to come in, and phone call. So as a salesperson, you didn't want to push people, but you were waiting constantly for the responses back. Do you want to go ahead with the order? Because you've only got so many hours in the day, and well, if you want that shipped by DHL, I'm going to need to have the order in by at least 1 p.m. So it was very mandrolic, as they say, and we had long days, and that has obviously, with my IT mind, brought me to the point now where streamlining and trying to do things in fewer clicks, but not lose the experience of the users that develop those processes is important to me. So that's kind of where my mind is at, is listening to people, finding the pinch and pain points, and then saying, I have a solution. And then it's up to them how they want to progress that without stepping out of their comfort zone.
Sir, and not to add to that, but a little asterisk that went off in my mind. I saw a post the other day on LinkedIn about the days of the faxes, and I thought about faxes and telexes and all of that stuff. And I remember that was the sweetest sound in sales, especially on a Friday afternoon at 3:30 or 4 for that single ring to come in and the contract to come out the other side. But yeah, I relate to that. Yeah. You've actually moved across airlines. You've moved through MROs and marketplaces. Which transition felt the riskiest for you at the time?
It's really starting out on my own, taking something on, growing it myself. It's a comfort zone thing to go 9 to 5, know what your date is, your salary date is, and then going paycheck to paycheck. And when you're in a bigger company, what you achieve kind of gets lost. Now, and again, I think when we've had discussions before previously, I'm not all about the financial gain. I really do enjoy the satisfaction and the customer satisfaction. Somebody said to me many years ago, there's no point in going to work upset. You've got to want to be where you are. You've got to go to work whistling. And I really do connect with that because, even my time working with Flybe and Flybe Aviation Services, walking through the hangar, taking the time with the individuals that you work with or they work in your teams, that's important. Just taking those few minutes and connecting with people, you get a lot more back from those individuals. So yeah, it's important to me to to move forward, learn things, but yeah, the biggest step is stepping out on your own. Worrying about the income of the business and what it gives you and how you can progress and develop more by doing that. So yeah, that's a big worry.
I relate to that. This isn't about me, but I'll share something. So I went from college to psychology, and then I did a complete about face. I went into finance. I became a stockbroker, and then I opened my own business, right? And that fear, that uncertainty that you just talked about, I can absolutely relate over. And my story is accidental aviation, but I'll talk about that another day. But I sold a business in '07, and the plan was to go into another one, and then I found aviation, and the rest was history. But yeah, it's exciting and it's scary both at the very same time. So I relate to that very, very, very well.
Especially when you take on staff, you know that
Yes,
somebody has made a leap from a a job
correct.
they're happy with, but they want something different to take on somebody and be responsible for their income and how the businesses move forward. That's a something you lose sleep over.
You do. You absolutely do. And when you realize these people rely on you, absolutely 100%. So was there, how do I say this? Was there a moment when you realized that you shifted from doing the work to shaping the work that gets done? Or is that like a hindsight type of thing? I don't know if I said that right.
No, no, it's yeah, it's a subtle change.
It is.
You suddenly realize you're making decisions based on the experiences you've had and the people you've dealt with without really realizing you're making the change. I've just recently turned 54, and it's when I recollect all the people that have managed me or I've worked with, I've taken on board a lot of what they've said, and at the age and experience I've reached, I can discount some of it, reflect on it, change it how I see it in my mind, and then move it forward. So I think it's a nice situation to be in to say, yeah, I learned there, I didn't learn so much there. That person didn't probably give me something positive. And I think that shaped me. I think people have shaped me the most throughout my whole career. Absolutely.
Absolutely brilliant. For what it's worth, I agree with it 100%. I mean, I think all of us, I think life gives us the ability to see or not see, and our ability to see it, I think, is a gift. And I'm glad that you're talking about it because I believe in it 100%. I believe in what you just said 100%. So
Thank you.
which role do you think prepared you the most for running your own platform, even if it didn't feel like that at a time? I know you went through a lot over the years and you are where you are today. So I felt like asking.
Okay, for running my own platform, I think I'd still have to take the role. I was a materials planner for Flybe Aviation Services for some time, and that involved viewing all of the processes and what we were doing from the buying materials department, but going out and finding better solutions. And that started my brain, ticking in the direction of, work smarter, not harder. When it comes to the connection to a platform like this, I had the benefit in that role of
Hmm.
trying to develop what we called the Flybe dashboard, and that was an oversight of the entire hangar bay slots and the maintenance that was currently there. So it would give reporting of not only the man hours that were accruing in each slot, on each aircraft type, but also the materials that were outstanding, the chase sheets that were required, the AOGs. So it was all categorized and available by one simple system. Now, I spent a lot of time dealing with the business managers from the IT department, turning what I had in my head into IT speak to eventually create that system in the background. So I think that's where IT connected to my day-to-day needs the most. And that's probably what I've taken as a role into what I'm doing now, trying to find the options out there for me and bring them into my everyday.
Makes sense. And I think I think IT is more than just an acronym, and there's a lot behind it. And I think you just touched on some of that. So if I can ask you this, looking back, right? If I asked you to just look back right now, which move would have scared the heck out of your younger self? What would it be?
Well, when I was far younger, I wouldn't have dreamed of having or running two businesses with slightly different directions. But again, it comes down to, thankfully, the experience and the contacts. And if I could speak to my younger self, I think the key thing would be patience
Yeah.
and the people side of what I do. I was very fortunate, as I've mentioned earlier in this conversation. My parents owned two pubs, so and I got to an age. So we moved into the pubs when I was 9, and we moved out when I was 23. So I spent the latter years working behind the bar. In my younger years, I was the one taking the plates of food out. So I dealt with a multitude of different people on a daily basis. So I learned a lot about, the Friday night revelers and the family that have come in for a nice Sunday lunch. And I think that helped me immensely in forming judges of character. Now, we all make mistakes. Obviously, I've gone through my career and there's probably, directions I've gone in where I should have thought about it more, taken more time to make the decision, and I've got involved in agreements or contracts, and I thought, does it really suit me? Did I give it enough, forethought about what I wanted to achieve here, and have I got the right people with me? So again, we're always learning, but we in some ways have to learn less with once we gauge the experience, and you're laying there quiet at night in the dark and thinking, no, I've been here before and I remember this, and don't do that, and maybe don't spend that just at this point. So yeah, I think if I was talking to my younger self, it would be people, judge a character, and develop trust more before making leaps forward and
I
signing
like
contracts.
that. I like that. It's funny. I thought about this as I asked it and as you were speaking about it. If I can go back and talk to my younger self, I know what I would have done differently. But I think my younger self would have told me to go pound sand because my younger self knew everything and he would not have listened, even to himself from the future.
Yeah.
Um, Let me shift gears for just one quick second, if I could. So you've been on both the buy and the sell side, right? And I have my own opinion. A lot of people have their own opinion, but I'm interested in your opinion on where those two sides, the buy side and the sell side, where they misunderstand each other the most.
Okay. Um, Buyers want the requisition off their screen as quickly as possible. And when I look back to the buying departments of companies I've worked with, and it reflects back actually on the statement we made earlier of this is the way we've always done it. When a buyer looks at the history of let's say it was back in the day, a Bruce Industries ballast unit. Well, they type in the part number, it says, this is where we've always gone. This is where we've always bought it. This has always been the price. And they tend to just like raise the order, requisition done. Don't need to worry about that anymore. And the thing is with people, we are repetitive, but I think, when I'm not going as far as slowing up the process as some companies do. Why you must have 5 quotes for this particular item. If you've got good contacts, and good colleagues out there that can help you, just taking the time to make a phone call and getting an understanding of where those piece parts that make up a service bulletin kit can be purchased, and then finding another avenue to speed up the process and have the piece parts in stock so the kits can be performed and created on site. The time you spent at the beginning is saving hours at the end. And I think for buyers, it's important to learn that whole process of going out and finding other opportunities to
Right.
purchase. For the sellers, I think it's difficult because certainly in the supplies realm, it's not just selling the part, because some things are out of your control. And certainly when Aviapool came about and we developed the whole system of quick quoting, having the answers for example, just one tool, and we would have 5 or 6 suppliers ready to go to quote from. The situation when you look at the regions of those suppliers and the shipping headache of getting it from A to B, that's just as important.
It
So,
is.
I've had people come to me, during my time at Aviapool and asking, for advice on how it all works. And then since my time at Aviapool, where they don't realize the hard work in the fulfillment side, the actual manual part of a part being picked up and shipped from A to B. It's all very well developing the AI, but and this is something again I want to streamline in AVSpares, because I'm already starting to talk with companies who've created APIs that will allow you to get a quick quote for the shipping of the item you've just requested from a supplier, all in the same platform. And that's another important module that I want to get out there, so you don't
Absolutely.
have to leave AVSpares. You can do everything in the same place. So yeah, it's very difficult for sellers to make promises when they've got to get something from A to B as well as part of the process.
And that's a very, very important point. Even just that shipping module that you talked about, we definitely have the technology, we definitely have the providers, and I think it's something that hasn't fully connected yet in many, many places. And I think if we look back at it in the next, let's say, 5 years or 10 years, we're going to see some amazing changes with that technology and with other related technology that'll help that side a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
100%.
So back to the buyers, I guess, a little bit. So what part of aviation sourcing sounds simple on paper? Because I know you just talked a little bit about buyers and sellers, but I think we spent a little bit of time on the seller. So on the other side, what part of aviation sourcing sounds simple on paper but breaks immediately in the real world? I have my ideas, but I'm interested in hearing yours.
Well, just going back to marketplaces, as a buyer, you want to find a site or a platform that gives you a multitude of options. If you do decide to go out and make the process a little bit more broad in where you're trying to acquire items from. The problem is with marketplaces is that people upload their stock. Sometimes it's not uploaded often enough. Stock moves very quickly. And the dead ends and the loops that buyers tend to go around, I think is a big time suck. So, it's important that listing sites talk with their suppliers, make it easier for the buyers to have trust and faith. And again, going back to my platform, we're just about to add a new ranking system to AVSpares. So there'll be gold, silver, and bronze suppliers that buyers can then have a little bit more trust and a little bit more understanding of that supplier will quote you in less than 24 hours. That supplier updates their stock once a week. They have an AOG service. All these little things add points to the scale of 100, which gives them a gold, silver, or bronze ranking. And I want to do that because so many people have given me feedback in the last 4 years of buyers saying, hey, these suppliers just never respond. But when you reach out to those suppliers, the sad part is, yeah, I don't want to quote it because that order's not worth my while. They only want 50 washers. And that's a shame. So how do we bridge that gap? And it's still something I'm thinking about a lot. How do I then say to my suppliers, look, we want you to be genuine. Our buyers are in a hurry. And I know, something that has been going through my mind about misconception in the industry, and that the word that's probably used too much is AOG. AOG is used far too much. And, when you start an AOG process and you pull out all the stops to help someone, and that's another thing we do at AVSpares, is we don't just say, here's the listing site, search for yourself. we also have a requests at avspares.com email address where you can send your list to me, and I can then import that list, and I can try to find every part I can within my supplier network, all the contacts I have, and send you in the right direction. And that's all part of the membership system that we provide. So yeah, it's important for buyers to get the right answers as quickly as possible. And I do feel upset when I do get comments saying this supplier hasn't replied in time, or that was yesterday. I was critical, and I needed more help. So that's what I'm trying to overcome with the platform.
For what it's worth, I agree with you. The only thing I would either add or supplement, because I think it's a combination of the two, is that technology that you talked about, the whether it's AI, whether it's anything else, but where we're headed, I think that can be used a little bit more. I absolutely agree with you on it wasn't worth my time, so I didn't want to answer it. As you said, he wanted to buy 50 washers, and it would cost $15 to quote out a $5 part.
Sure.
And that's where that, in my opinion, for what it's worth, it's where that technology can come in, because part of your inbound system can be and should be automated to automatically send out the prices at a cheaper rate than a human being. But then you should have another set of your components, for example, that require human intervention, that need that human in the picture, that would come in. And I don't think collectively we're moving fast enough towards that. So I love the conversations about bringing in more of that technology in there. I absolutely love it. And I agree.
Absolutely. I do believe that, even if it's a random check, there should be eyes on what's going out the door, because again, you may not fully understand the requirement out there. And if you can understand one buyer's needs, then maybe you can adapt that thinking to multiple buyers and put in the solution yourself.
Correct.
I'm not adverse, like I said to you with SB kits, I'm not adverse for AVSpares to buy in stock of something that I know is repetitively being looked for.
Correct.
Because I don't have an issue with minimum order quantity. That's up to them if they want to pay,
Correct.
shipping from A to B, but it's a very light, it's a minuscule price in total. But if it helps the buyer in the long run, again, it comes back to the facilitation and the streamlining. That's what I want to achieve.
Facilitation and streamlining. I think that's a great way to sort of, either pyramid or funnel down to the right answer. I like that a lot. So is that where you think, well, how do I ask this? So I guess I'll ask it basically. Where do delays and failures usually start? I think it's partly with what we just talked about. Are there any other places that you think these delays or failures usually start, even if they don't show up right away?
Yeah, again, the manual side, the actual shipping
Right.
of goods, the customs clearance, delays with whatever events may be going on worldwide, like the current situation we have. Flights are being diverted, flights are being cancelled, and everyone thinks, it's passengers that are being affected. Well, you think about the amount of air freight that doesn't make it from A to B because things are diverted, flights are cancelled, and they are critical items. The aviation industry, and I could anecdotally tell you about AOG type situations that I've been in as a salesperson at 3 a.m. in the morning, living apart myself, 3 hours drive to an airport for a flight that's at 6:30. It's really important that people understand all the legwork that goes in the background. And I know it's a physical thing to move something from A to B, and AI can only help in the systems that surround that, but it's physically moving. And I think that's a choke point that's going to be very difficult to ever overcome.
Aviation touches so many things. I mean, unrelated to aviation is at the heart of aviation. Let me tell you what I say. Most of us, including myself, we never usually think about where a lot of our Christmas presents come from. Obviously, our relatives are sending them, but in between, it's the truck drivers, it's the warehouse people, it's the people putting it on the plane, it's the people flying the plane, it's the people offloading the plane and then delivering it to the distribution centers. We don't think about that, and all of that is part, I think, of what we're talking about, I believe.
And then we still complain because we get charged $34 to send something from here to the States. When you consider all of the costs of those individuals and the fuel and everything, all everyone's time, it's important to understand all of the legwork and all of the hoops everyone jumps through from for doing that. But you know, it goes back to what we're saying about software. It's great that you can sell something really quick, or you can automatically quote something, but you cannot take the travel and the actual shipping out of the equation.
Listen, I don't want to give away anything, but I'm old enough to know better, but not too old not to care, so to speak. And I remember, I mean, my term papers in college were on a typewriter. I think we had one line at the house with a 20-foot cord, and that was my portable phone at the time. I think those lessons still with me because it helps me appreciate some things, but they also remind me of a time where convenience wasn't just an automatic thing every single time. I go, aha, I remember, and it helps keep me grounded. And I think that kind of thinking falls in place with what we're talking about a little bit because it's never usually about the moment. It's not just about the buy. It's not just about the sell. It's about every related component that touches
Right.
that transaction,
Yeah.
all the way to the human factor. I think that's a great point.
But the thing is, I mean, I can quote you all day long, Ralph, and my quotes will arrive with you in 2 minutes. But you're always going to remember the part that arrived 3 days late. It was nothing to do
Correct.
with me. Yeah, I shipped it
Correct.
out the door. You know, customs didn't clear it. As much as you explain, if somebody says, "Oh, you know, I won't order from them again because they are based in the States or they are based in Germany or they are based in Singapore," and it always takes that 2 or 3 days, let me pay more and get it in my own backyard. You lose that customer through something you couldn't help. So I think that's a shame. So
And
communication is key.
it
Communication
is,
is
and
key.
that ties back to the insurance thing that you talked about earlier. People will remember they won't remember rather how fast you quoted them, but if in transit the part breaks, they will tell everybody for the next 10 years how you broke their part. So that insurance becomes a central part of protecting your reputation. And if you're
Yeah.
able to do that on every transaction, they will not they might remember the time that the part broke, but they will also remember that you fixed it, and that
Right.
carries forward with it.
100% agree.
Yeah.
100% agree.
So let me ask you this, maybe shifting gears just a little bit. How do you believe leadership change, or I didn't say that right. How does leadership change when you're running a platform instead of a team on the floor?
Well, dealing with people, again, it brings experience, it brings know-how. But when you're dealing with a platform and you realize that everything has to be queued in a certain way, you've got a third party developer that you're talking to, and you want everything to end up at the end result you do. But when you take the human element out of it, you are beholden to what can be fixed in a certain order or a machine somewhere. You know, my servers are in Dublin with Amazon Web Services. You know, if and I was talking to somebody the other day, and I got a message through, and it said can't log in, realizing that there's a server issue with a particular page that we've just deployed, and something hasn't been thought about with like an OTP code or something. You get the start. People will let you know pretty quickly, and when you don't have a large team, but you know that your website is dealing with a lot of throughput and
Right.
traffic, you start to worry about those seamless nuts and bolts that are working in the background, the wheels that are turning. So you're managing something that you probably can never have 100% in your control because anything can happen. So that's a big wake up call when you've got a team and they know how you operate and how they operate, you know how they operate, then it's easier probably to get your message across. So yeah, that was a
Let's
big
look at
change.
that. Let's look at that backwards a little bit. What are some of the leadership habits that you had to unlearn as you learn more, or as you scaled and learn more?
Yeah, this is a I suppose not a difficult subject, but it's an eye opener for me. I've been involved with a lot of leaders. Some have taught me good things. Some have had their own agenda, and it's been difficult to work with. But in the long run, you try and take just the good. and you're trying to remember all of the good and piece it together to make up what you believe should be a good leader. Now, I truly believe that a leader should lead from the front. They should be fully prepared to roll up their sleeves, do a stock check when, everything is kicking off and there's a lot of work. To sit back and not be involved and just to manage, I don't think is the right approach. I remember, again, going back to my younger years, there was a customer of ours. He was a solicitor, used to come into my father's pub, and he lived some time in Scandinavia, and he knew of a Norwegian paper mill. And the owner of the paper mill went to school with the guy that was the janitor. But every lunchtime, they would play cards together because he never forgot that he was a friend. And I kind of like that mentality, how it's about the people that you're managing and not separating yourself from the day to day, having an understanding. And that leads me on to a point where I'm working from home a lot and I miss the office collaboration, the ideas, the standing round the water cooler,
Yeah.
coming up with the opinions and the thoughts and say, hey, I've never thought of that. Now, yeah, the businesses I run all can be run from where I sit at home or whether I'm doing the customer visits with SF Aviation. But at the same time, I do really, really miss that getting out there. And I like to visit customers. I like to sit in their offices, hear what's going on in the background, hear people saying, oh, when's that going to be ready? And why haven't we got that piece of software ready? And me just listening out. Or why are we paying that much for igniters from Champion when we could get them? And I just listen about things that I know and try and plug the gap as such. But yeah, that's important too.
It's funny. Well, not quite funny as much as maybe nostalgic, and yes, a little bit funny. It's those experiences I believe that helped shape me and shaped a lot of people. I had two mentors when I was 22 or 23 that until this day I practiced the lessons that I learned from them. And I don't know. I'm sure if everything were remote all the way back then, I would have picked up other lessons. But it's hard for me to sort of imagine how those would go, and I do miss that as well. I have the luxury of working out of the house most of the time as well, but I agree with you. I like rolling up my sleeves. I've always done that. I don't know how not to do it. Sometimes I overroll my sleeves, but and then I have to sort of step back a little bit and let somebody else step up and things like that. But it's fun to think about those, the ideas that were born from customer meetings, the plans that were made around that water cooler and everything that you learned in between. I miss those. I miss those a lot.
It's important to bond with people you work with. I've probably learned more from mid-management rather than the flighty CEOs that give you
100%.
some small amount of their time. I don't know how they would feel looking down from those lofty heights, thinking, well, I give them an hour of my time, but those mid-management levels, I think, because they are more of the sleeve roller type and they're in it with you, I've learned probably more from that level in my time.
Most people nowadays that I deal with, depending on the stage of where the deals are, but I make it a point of talking to the people that carry the boxes, that open the doors, that show up early, because they give not a conflicting perspective, but they give a realistic perspective to what the CXO, whomever that might be, wants. The CXO has certain responsibilities. He or she are accountable to the board or to ownership. But the people that make those numbers come true are the ones that open up the door at 6 a.m, that open up the boxes, that use the software that they're looking to buy. And I think lessons that come from them are absolutely priceless. And then when you put the two storylines together, you've got that complete picture. And I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
I really, really do.
That middle management gives you an idea of how to deal with upper management because you see the pains they're going through. Correct. As you're working under them. And when they came back from a board meeting where they didn't quite get all of the hard work and the capex justification to buy something new that you wanted, they've got the frown on their face. They've got to deliver bad news to you, but you can see their experience tell them, no, just bide our time. They're going to need this eventually. So you kind of,
Absolutely.
that's fine. And that's again where patience comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And from software perspective, I don't want to take over anything, but I'll add this because I think it's relevant. One of our newest features came from that kind of conversation. Nobody at the top would have ever thought that buying a part from a work order was worth their time. But when you talk to the people in the middle that need to wait 3, 4, 5, 10 days to buy a $50 part only because four departments and 3 different people were involved in that purchase, it's mind blowing. I mean, it would cause your head to look like mine if you had to do that every single day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you have to have those conversations, even if it's your company, have it with your people, and if it's not your company, have it with their people as well.
You have to talk to the people on the ground, and the ones
You
who are
do.
going. When it might be a stores department member who said, oh, we scan this all manually, and then we have to save it as a PDF, which is the GRN number. Then it
Yep.
gets put on this drive, and there's 25,000 files there. You say, well, okay, let's develop a platform for you where you literally log in and you type in the job number of the aircraft they're working on, and then you can issue a list of all the PDFs of all the parts that have been issued to that aircraft and find
Absolutely.
them so much quicker. Little
Absolutely.
things like that is a godsend to somebody that spends most of their day scanning and trawling through PDFs trying to find page 14 of 112 just so they can give it a copy to a customer rep. And that's important in the maintenance side as well.
It is. It absolutely
Streamlining all the
is.
time.
So let's build on that for just quite a minute. Where do you think aviation companies today are over investing?
Well, this brings in the whole AI conversation. There's a lot of fear of AI. There's a lot of fear of keeping up with those that are moving forward quickly with AI. I think a lot of people spend money because of their fear of being left behind.
Right.
We've mentioned in the past about companies in the aviation sector, and I think there's a lot of people that are very old school. They want the fast solution, but they're worried about losing touch about all of the processes everything goes through. But then they hear their competitors are moving forward with this and this, and there's been more investment, and they've taken on more staff doing other things or increasing their IT departments to encompass what they're trying to achieve. And I think people then leap forward, and this is where they're forced to make wrong decisions. So I think some financial decisions are made incorrectly when it's a case of stepping back slightly, seeing what happens in the marketplace, seeing how the solutions other people are putting in place, and the cost of those, and then making a better informed decision.
Absolutely. And if you turn that upside down, where do you think they're dangerously underinvesting?
Underinvestment, again, it comes down to streamlining the process of getting the eventual part from A to B, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, a company can invest in a whole fleet of network transport themselves. But again, it would be foolhardy, I think, to go ahead and do that sort of thing without knowing what may come and replace other processes in that area. Again, in some ways, as much as we talk about AI and the fear of replacing people, finding good, knowledgeable, experienced people is a good thing. Is a good
Absolutely.
thing to do.
Absolutely.
And again, I think of that phrase I've seen on LinkedIn. It's where it stems around, what if we train these people and they leave, and it's what if we don't train them and they stay?
I love that.
Keeping people updated with what's going on in the world and getting your staff together is so important as well. And you get the gratitude back from those staff because they feel involved.
Absolutely.
That's an important thing.
That's one of my all-time favorite quotes, memes, anything in between that I see in there, because it rings true, and it has, for me at least, it has lessons in just about any business sense or application. It fits right in.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if I may sort of complement or supplement something that you just said, one of the places, there are a bunch, but it's not just about what I have to say. One of the places I think people are over investing, and this is going to sound contradictory, is AI. And one of the places they are under investing is AI and architecture. That's why That's why so many people that you read about, so many companies, regardless of what the source is, I believe they have pilots going on for new technology, but not many of them are actually implementing those pilots, or the pilots are failing. That training comes in, that investment comes in, that architecture comes in, because as we've talked about a million times before, that AI is great, but absent the proper architecture, I think it is the worst thing that can happen. It's an accelerant. It gets you to that fire very, very fast. But
Yeah.
they're sort of joined at the hip, or very, very, very related. But if we were to remove the buzzwords, right? So what do you think actually moves the needle? With or without technology, new way, old way, it doesn't matter. Are those things still the same?
Um, Customer service, I think, moves the needle. It creates the repeat business and going the extra mile. Um, it's fine to automate the seamless processes in producing the documentation, grabbing a copy of the cert like your software does, and streamlining the process like with your software, and the work order process, and telling you what piece parts are needed to create that final
Right.
repair. That's one thing. But when something goes wrong, which inadvertently can do quite often, getting on the phone, being honest, gaining the trust that, as we said earlier, if you fix a problem, people will remember that. And I think that's so important to do. And, I've had many conversations in the past saying, this has happened, that's happened. How can I correct that for you and make amends? And I think that's really important to do. Customer service is paramount. Communication, customer service.
I learned that from my dad ages ago, believe it or not, and it has nothing to do with aviation. But I don't remember the exact circumstance, nor does it matter for now. But I asked him, "Why do you keep going back to whomever that person was that we keep going back to?" And he said to me something very, very simple back then. It didn't click for a while, but as I learned more, it became more important. He goes, "They both do the exact same thing. So on paper, they're the same. But I keep going back to such and such because he also A, B, C, and D every single time without having to ask. And these are the benefits of A, B, C, and D. And, I think I was 23 or 24, fresh out of college or right after college. And honestly, I didn't learn it. And then I learned a little bit a few years later, and I learned a little bit a few years later, but that always stuck with me. So I think that's a really, really cool way to explain that. I like that a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as we start to wrap up, let me ask you a couple of things. I know what my answer would be, but it's not about me. What lessons do you think took you too long to learn and you wish you would have learned sooner?
Um, Somebody once said to me in an interview, "What do you think your worst trait is?" And I owned up to it, and it was delegation. Um, I've always had in my younger years a vision of where I wanted the end result to be, and I had it set in my mind. And when you then have to say, "Look, this is what I've got in my head. Can you just go run this project?" I found that really difficult. I found that really difficult because I'm very much a hands-on individual. I've had to learn to say, "This is the end result I want. It's 6 weeks time. Can you just come back to me and give me your ideas in relation to this and the solution, and tell me how it's going to be either better than what I've come up with, or teach me something that I needed to learn about what's out there that could have saved me time in the long run." And I think um, delegation takes away the micromanagement, which is a very easy trap to fall into. When you've got maybe a small team, it's great to collaborate, but to also watch every minuscule process is a waste of time. And you have to step back from that and let everyone else develop, whether they be young or old or have been in the aviation industry for a long time, and they're bringing their past errors and experience in. Just work together. Just work together to get
Absolutely.
the end solution. And I think that's what I've learned the most is trusting, but also bring that patience in that I mentioned earlier. Having the patience to understand someone, how they work, and then just give the trust that they know what they're doing, and just let it go and let them work at their own speed and their own capabilities.
So I love that answer, by the way. I believe in it 100%. I am dead set against micromanagement. I don't think there's a good use for it. Some people might agree or disagree. It doesn't really matter. Delegation is a big one. I think that's how I learned. Somebody in my past, some other people along my journey trusted me enough to give me the reins, and they understood that I will make mistakes, and they understood that I will learn from them. And I owe that at the very least to some of those people, to a lot of those people. And I think everybody else sort of deserves the same opportunity rather than having to account for how many minutes they did X and how many seconds they did Y or Z.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So in the direction that this industry is headed, like sort of like a two question in one. What still excites you about aviation, even though I think we've talked about a lot of it? And number two, what keeps you optimistic about where we're headed?
Okay, so what excites me? I still really enjoy the old school feel of the industry. I try my best to attend at least 3 or 4 conference expo shows a year, because I bump into old faces, I make new friends and colleagues and connections, and because of my change in my career, um, it is it has moved from more of the supply chain and having to understand the nuts and bolts of the everyday manual things, more so to the IT and how fixes are coming in place. So when I start moving away from in previous expos, which I still talk to these people, but my focus isn't on as much as the supply chain side of it. I still understand all of that, but it's like what is around the corner. So I get talking to IT companies. For example, there's a company in Estonia, and they came up with some great solutions with AI agents, streamlining the whole process of previous companies, which I would have given my left arm for, having that technology when I needed it maybe 6 to 8 years ago. So I enjoy that side. I enjoy the people side immensely. The aviation industry is a real social animal. And I love the fact that you bump into people and it's a coffee, it's a let's go have some dinner, and it's a still deals are done over the dinner table feel to it. And I like
It
that
is.
a
It
lot, and
is.
that's what excites me.
It is.
It's fascinating, when you think about the technology involved in that aircraft and all the people that take it from A to B. It's still, you can see younger people with their mouths still open, you know, in awe of how these things get off the ground, and how all of these little piece parts, when you're sat in that plane seat, knowing that the exit sign, the carpet, you know, everything involved with that making that aircraft what it is still exciting for me. For an industry I'd never initially considered in my younger years.
It is. It absolutely is. I like that answer. So before we wrap up, do you have time for two more questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, please go
Okay.
ahead.
So if aviation, this is, we're completely switching gears, right? So if aviation disappeared tomorrow, where in the world would you disappear to and why?
Oh, well, I've already told you about the UK and its weather system. Somewhere warmer would be great.
Uh-huh.
Today it's 16 degrees. So what's that? 60
Uh-huh.
Fahrenheit. So it would be lovely to be somewhere warmer. I'm quite lucky in the fact that my marketplace has been kept to, in essence, the nuts and bolts of part numbers. So what I've done with AVSpares, in obviously it being originally so based in aviation, I've now brought in databases for the marine industry. Electronics has always been background, but I've got a lot of electronic suppliers there. And I've also now moved into marine and transit. So we've got bus and rail spares starting to appear on the site.
Okay.
So I've kind of, in a way, feathered my nest. If something in aviation, I could sort of sideline with the same platform into the electronics, into marine. But again, the whole platform with AV Spares, and obviously what I do in the consulting and contracting work, I could really sort of, with the use of AI and tech, move into different industries, and I could have different databases of different industries altogether. So
Yeah.
I think I've got it covered.
So I like that. I mean, the possibilities are truly endless. We're going into that age. I think in my lifetime, major changes, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but major changes would take a decade or two, or they were generational changes. So you would have time to learn, acclimate, get better, and then put to use. And nowadays, it's just moving at the speed of tech, and it's scary and exciting to me at the very same time. And I think you touched a little bit on that. One last thing, one aviation buzzword that you think is overused right now. I think you touched on that earlier today, but I want to make sure it's the right one.
Yeah, crying wolf with AOG is frightening. The amount of people, even going back to 1991, 92, I'm AOG, I need it here tonight. And that's frightening because that's a big time thing. And again, anecdotally, I was mentioning I had the pleasure back in my younger years in the first aviation company of being on the rotor for the AOG pager, and 3 a.m. that you'd have Aer Lingus or Monarch. I'm AOG. The aircraft leaves at 7 a.m. It's 20 past 2. So you drive 8 miles in the middle of the night. You do exactly the same as you do all day. Take the order, which arrives by fax, and then you transfer that whole order into a box, get it to the point, everything you need with the certification. But the added enjoyment is then putting your own car and putting that box on the passenger seat and driving 3.5 hours to Luton, from somewhere on the south coast, and literally walking up to Goods Inn and saying, there you go, and it's thanks, we really, really needed this solved, so thanks for everything you've done. But again, that's where the customer satisfaction thing for me kicks in, because when you get in the office, say, oh yeah, I dealt with an AOG last night,
That's funny.
and the boss is happy, and the airline's happy that you've helped, and that's what spurs you on. So yeah, AOG is frighteningly used too often.
It is.
Because people they want to put the pressure on you and know that even if it still meets critical, they've passed what they needed to. So
awesome. Well, couple of things as we wrap up. First of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I learned a lot more things, which is exactly what I wanted to do on that. And I also, I learned it's AVSpares. I've been calling it AVSpares for a while, so I'll try to make that adjustment, but forgive me if I let the AVSpares slip in 1 or 2 more times. I very, very much enjoyed the show. To everybody who's listening, if they have questions for you, if they need to get in touch with you, would you like to share a phone number or an email address or a website that they can go to get to get in touch with you?
Sure, no problem at all. So with AVSpares, it's info@avspares.com. We'll be able to help you with questions regarding the marketplace, memberships, and what we're capable of, and the new modules that are coming your way. And then on the consulting, contracting side, where I go in and do the streamlining and facilitation, by all means, send it to sales@sfaviation.co.uk.
Perfect. Stefan, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for joining us. As I said, I learned a lot. I very, very much appreciate it. If you guys don't know AVSpares, or if you don't know Stefan Fletcher, please get to know him. In the 1.5 years that I've been speaking with him, I'm very, very proud to call him a friend. And I think he's one of the good people out there that I think can help with whatever you want to do. So one more time, thank you very much. And everybody, thank you for listening. See you soon.
Thanks very much, Ralph. Thank you.